cosmic, and once again, to the lives of Heliopolis. Or we see him offer an altar to the god Ra, and another altar to the goddess Hathor, or a statue made of a mixture of gold and silver. It is unfortunate that the saved part of the Palermo stone ended there, so that we don't know what offerings he made for the priests and the gods during his reign. But that is enough to make us realize that the era of that king saw the onset of the authority of the priests and their exploitation of a good king to get all that they wanted. During his reign, a royal decree was issued that exempted the clergy and the peasants of the temples from any other work that might be required for the reform projects in any territory, and he threatened any government employee who violated that decree. No wonder he is the third king of the Five Dynasty, and the priest's blood ran in his veins. In this way, the actions of Navar-Areka-Ra helped to strengthen and enrich the priests. Thus, with the passage of time, the king's authority began to weaken, and the central authority of the government began to disintegrate. With reference to the wealth of the priests, I'd like to mention the tomb of one of the king's senior employees, Ra-War, who had among his many titles Director of the Royal Palace, Keeper of the King's Secrets, and the God's Priest of Upper and Lower Egypt. The rooms, the lobbies, and the corridors in the tomb of the priest, Ra-War, numbered 50 at least, and the number of his remaining statues is more than 100. Just look at the tomb facade, and you will realize the wealth of its owner. If you compare his tomb with those of the king's sons, you will see that it outweighs them by far in terms of luxury of construction and in the number of lobbies and rooms. The tomb of Ra-War is not the only tomb where you glimpse the wealth of the senior priests. There are many other examples in Abusir, Geza, and Saqqara. The senior priests and the staff had a great deal of wealth and influence. They built for themselves tombs that were many times greater in size and grandeur than those of the king's sons in the Fourth Dynasty. In the last years of the rule of the Fourth Dynasty, Speskaf wanted to put an end to the influence and hegemony of the priests, but he did not live long enough to achieve his aims. The revolution of Sepskaf speeded up the end of the Fourth Dynasty, who had quarreled with one another since the death of King Cheops. At last, about the year 2560 BC, the dynasty founded by King Senefru came to an end. It was succeeded by another dynasty of the Sun priests who would rule Egypt for 140 years. The Sun priests succeeded in taking over the governance, and the rule of Egypt was passed on to another house. There is not enough information about how that change took place, but it left a mark upon the Egyptians and caused a major shake-up Egypt had not experienced before. There was a difference of opinion, and there were several parties, so the priests fabricated the story of the magician and the pregnancy of the priest's wife. User KF was the first of the Fifth Dynasty kings who occupied a senior post in the Temple of the Sun. With the help of the priests, he was able to sit on the throne. To make his claim to the throne legitimate, he married Khantkaus, daughter of King Menkaura, who built the third pyramid of Giza. In this dynasty, the most luxurious temples were built using the most expensive architectural materials. The Fifth Dynasty paid a degree of attention and care to temples that the country had never seen before. The art of architecture made a lot of progress in this era. The inscriptions on the walls of temples and the granite pillars included palm crowns in the form of palm fronds tied in packets, and there were statues of lions and bulls. The reign of King Unas, the last king of the Fifth Dynasty, was characterized by many changes in more ways than one. During his era, the writing of the famous religious stories known as the Pyramid Text started, as they were not known before his time. After that time, they were written on the walls of rooms inside the pyramids of kings and some queens, which provided researchers with a lot of information about the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. These texts are a collection of different amulets that contained prayers and some religious and other rituals, some dating to the pre-First Dynasty, a total of 714 amulets. The Fifth Dynasty saw an increase in the influence of the clergy in the country and on the affairs of the people. They built different temples for the god Ra and the gods related to him. They established a close relationship with the priests of the sun, and they showered the priests and their temples with gifts and donations. But the people intuitively felt the cunning of the priests, who transferred the worship of God to the worship of the sun, and the kings whom the priests deluded to believe that they were the sons of the god Horus, or Ra, or Amun, and that their happiness and salvation in the other world depended on wealth and prestige. Winning the bliss of the afterlife was only reserved for the kings and the wealthy. Where then did the poor, who make up the vast majority of the people, stand in relation to this belief? What happened? The people kept up their belief in Osiris, which was close to their hearts and understanding. It is a belief that did not take wealth into account, and it rewarded the benevolent and the kind-hearted who did not do evil regardless of his poverty or wealth. It was a kind of creed that took into account righteousness and justice. No one enjoys paradise except the pure-hearted, the well-meaning, and the well-intentioned who do not do harm to people. That creed says that every human being will soon face what he has done. Paradise is for the benevolent and the pious who do not do injustice to people nor commit dishonesty. Torture and hell are for those who do harm and evil. Neither their money, the priest's prayers, nor the offerings they make will plead for them. That was the belief the Egyptians had known since the first dynasty and even before that. It was destined that that creed would spread again in the days of the first dynasty. There was a kind of silent revolution which the people conducted against the influence of the priests of the sun during the late 5th dynasty. With reference to the origin, those are the people whom the Holy Quran told us about in the Surah Taha, verse 72. 72. They said, "Shall we regard never thee as more than the clear signs that have come to us, or than him who created us? So decree whatever thou desirest to decree, for thou canst only decree touching the life of this world." 73. For us we have believed in our Lord. May he forgive us our faults, and the magic to which thou didst compel us. For Allah is best and most abiding. 74. Verily he who comes to his Lord as a sinner at judgment, for him is hell. Therein shall he neither die nor live. 75. But such as come to him as believers who have worked righteous deeds, for them are ranks exalted. 76. Gardens of eternity, beneath which flow rivers, they will dwell therein for aye. Such is the reward of those who purify themselves from evil. Also in Surah Al-Tahrim, verse 11, and Allah sets forth, as an example to those who believe the wife of Pharaoh. Behold, she said, O my Lord, build for me in nearness to thee a mansion in the garden, and save me from Pharaoh and his doings, and save me from those that do wrong. Also see Surah Al-Qasas, verses 30-43, Surah Al-Shu'ara, verse 10-66, and Surah Al-Ah, verse 103-156. In these and other verses in the Holy Quran, there is evidence in the era of the pharaohs that the priests used magic to mislead people and make them believe that they were capable of doing anything. They are able to benefit or hurt the people. It was some kind of priestly terrorism, and we do not know where they got it from. Perhaps they learned it from the gods, or from the angels, or the apostles who had supernatural power to do good. The priests used to terrorize people and bring wealth and influence to themselves, as did the Good Samaritan. Priests were able through magic and the transfer of court orders among the people into devious tricks of revelation. They imposed their sovereignty over the people, the kings, and the rulers, during the whole of the ancient pharaonic history of Egypt. They were prepared to destroy everything that stood in the way of their ambitions. That was the same thing that happened to the call of Akhenaton at the hands of the priests of Amun, who destroyed his faith, his city, and the graves which they plundered and vandalized, including every trace of his call. The second evidence. The teachings mentioned in the pharaonic mythology by the gods and in the Book of the Dead, besides their absolute faith in resurrection and the account day or the day of reckoning, are conclusive evidence of the existence of a message of monotheism before the days of Akhenaton. But the clergy turned it into hateful idolatry that tarnished the image of the greatest civilization in history. So historians looked at it as a pagan civilization, in that the ancient Egyptian used to worship idols, those who changed in ingratitude the blessing and the grace of God and made their people's home a wasteland, rightly deserved to suffer the curse of God and the whip of torment. God set up over Egypt as absolute ruler people, whose origin or lineage we do not know, and they made the Egyptians suffer a lot.